kind of like Robbie, I kind of found it by accident. So I worked for a couple big engineering firms doing energy efficiency work with, oh, hey, now we're on. I can hear it. Okay. Doing work for energy services companies, which is an energy efficiency focused business. Started Asset Environments in 2016. It was just me at that point, and just fortunately, PACE got passed in Nebraska in 2017. Then the first ordinance got put in place in 2018. By that point, I'd heard of it and made a couple connections. Turns out the lobbyist in Nebraska that helped push a lot of it through, I was friends with his little sister in college. That's a very Nebraska thing to happen. It's a very small place. But right place, right time. And I was a guy that understood energy efficiency concept and energy modeling, and they needed that. And then bidding in the energy world, we dive heavy into green leverage, whether it's rebates or tax credits and deductions or specialty financing. So I knew enough about the finance world to speak to it moderately intelligently. So I did my first study in 2018. Actually, the third one done in Nebraska was a $24.9 million CPACE loan, which in 2018 was a big one. That was the biggest in the US in 2018. That was my third deal. I worked through a Nebraska football game to get that thing to happen. And if you're a big college football fan like I am in Nebraska, that's a big deal. That's a commitment right there. So that was deal number 3. So that was cool to be part of. It was the biggest deal in the US that year. And then we just kind of got found out. It's a small industry and people talk. And so we got asked to do more and more studies in more and more places. We're still a small firm. It's 7 people now, but about half of our work is CPACE studies. And like I said, we've done, I don't know, something approaching 400, probably 4 billion, probably, or something in qualified financing. We work with basically everybody in the industry. We do at least some amount of work for basically everybody. So yeah, right place, right time. So I fell flat on my face in lots of other things I tried as an engineering firm, but this one stuck. This one worked, and we're here. So
awesome. Well, we're lucky to have you both. Thank you for joining us. I guess before we get into the problems that were solved in real case studies and real use cases, what are the biggest problems to be solved by CPACE today?
I think it depends on, it's a hard question to answer because every project is unique. But I think by and large, the biggest problems that PACE is solving is either decreasing the cost of capital or providing capital where it isn't otherwise available. Like, that's how I view PACE as solving problems. It's always related to money. I mean, it's a financing tool. So it's either giving someone money that couldn't find it or helping reduce the borrowing costs for a project that is getting egregious quotes.
Yeah.
And
this is, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, where does that problem exist today?
Yeah, so it exists in certain asset classes. So, senior living, hospitality, student housing, projects where there is sort of an operating business are often harder to finance. And then projects that have hit some specific bump, like a budget overage or delay. I feel like we had talked about 1 or 2 others. Younger sponsors, right? People that have good ideas, but maybe not the track record to justify a loan from JP Morgan. And then, we always talk about this wall of maturities, which seems to always be a step ahead. But at some point, PACE will be used to just provide liquidity to take out financing that's maturing.
Yeah, this isn't exactly what you asked, but I've been really surprised at the malleability of PACE and the different ways it can be applied. And I'll give you a specific example just from sitting in my seat. So again, we do a lot of PACE studies and a lot of my staff works on these things. And we had a really great year the year before interest rates started spiking. And then as interest rates went up, it felt like everybody was coming to the closing table to get these things done. And so even through that Q3, Q4, when interest rates started going up, we had a lot of people rushing to get things done. And so we had an awesome year. We did a ton of studies. And Glenn was in this meeting. So Glenn is my business development guy. If you don't know Glenn, you probably will. He's our social butterfly. There's two kinds of people in this world. There are Glenn's friends, and there are people that are going to be Glenn's friends. So if you're in one of those two buckets, whether you know it or not. But Glenn was at this meeting, and we had like a January 1, like this coming year, like what are we going to look for? And after we just had this amazing year, I sat everybody down. I was like, hey guys, we got to tighten our belts here because a bunch of these things closed because interest rates were going up, but now we're in this high interest rate environment. And, I don't know what Pace's attractiveness is going to be when, you're getting charged the, 8%, 8.5%, whatever the number is, versus the 4.5%, 5% everybody was getting 12 months before. So I said, hey, I'm really scared this is going to dry up. And we really got to tighten our belts to be prepared for that. We had our next best year the next year. Like we did more studies that following year than we did the year before. And I think it was, I don't know exactly why, but I think it's just the attractiveness relative to other financing didn't go away. Like the margins between the two, were similar. The non-recourse function of it, the long-term financing, all of that was still the same. And so we saw more deals done the next year, which just blew my mind. 6 months in, it was like, I thought I was going to be slow this year. And I was like, I did too. So what do I know? But our workload has been really steady over the last many years. Like it just hasn't gone up and down that much. And we have this kind of interesting seat in the table, even though I'm not a finance guy and we're not directly, in the underwriting process and stuff. We do get this very broad view of the market because we work in so many states and work with so many financiers. So we kind of get to see who's active and what kind of deals they're doing and stuff. And it's been incredibly stable, which has been is unexpected given the ups and downs of all the other variables that can happen. So my point, I guess, maybe is that I've been surprised at the flexibility of the tool to work in many different market types and market conditions.
Have you seen technical problems solved with CPACE, like renewable energy or energy efficiency projects that otherwise would not have happened, be included in a project with CPACE?
I know the answer I'm supposed to say.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask the question directly.
Yeah, no, the reality is it's not really, not really. It is, I have a hard time coming up with a situation where somebody said, hey, we're trying to accomplish this technical thing. And so therefore we're using CPACE to then accomplish that technical thing. That is basically never the case. I'm sure there's exceptions, but let's call it never. Close enough. What it is, hey, I have this financial problem with the project I already wanted to build, and PACE is a good financial solution. Therefore, how do we think about the technical qualification process such that we can get to the financial solution we're looking for, right? We totally get that we're the tail on the dog here. Like this is a financial discussion. There's a reason there was 0 engineering sessions during the last 2 days. I need to talk to Mary about that and get at least one here. But we get it. This is a little bit dismissive, but we're a bit of a box checking process to qualify these things. Now, that being said, we do influence design sometimes, but usually it's in the pursuit of a certain number of dollars. And I'll give you an example. Like early on in a project, there are design changes you can make especially early, because that's kind of where we're going. It's kind of early, mid, late, where somebody was only going to qualify, for the $8.6 million, and they really wanted to get $11.2 million, especially if we're involved early on and there is still some ability to change the design. It's very likely we can make relatively low cost modifications to that design and get you to the PACE dollars you want to get to. It's very likely. That's not a slam dunk, but it's likely. Things like if you were going to use electric resistance heat and you go to a heat pump, that's a massive change in energy consumption. Or
put extra insulation in the roof.
Put one more insulation. Instead of doing R30, do R35, and now the entire roof structure is now PACE eligible, right? Like there are simple answers to these questions. Again, I'm not solving technical problems for people. What I'm doing is doing technical modifications to solve a financial problem. So it's a different kind of problem-solving mindset. But we do influence design sometimes, and we do make buildings, meaningfully more energy efficient. It's not usually the intent of what they were trying to do, but it is the end result of what happens. So that feels good when you can make things better than they would have been otherwise.
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, my answer is the same. Like, I want to say yes, right? Like, right. But I just haven't seen that project. Like one theoretical project that I keep trying to make happen is putting solar on the roof of a warehouse and thereby replacing the tenant's electric bill with a PACE payment.
Right.
Seems like such a good idea, right? I've been turning over every stone.
Yeah.
I can't find this project. So like that, and that is like a technical problem that I don't know if other people are trying to solve. I'm trying to solve, but where I see PACE being used is as a financial tool and making little optimizations along the way to either qualify the project or increase the financing.
I'm going to add one more, and it's one that I think seems like. Oh, go ahead. Hey, Wendy.
I have a question. So when you're talking about PACE, like I'm coming at it from a program administrator point of view, someone who stumbled into PACE as well. You know, I'm not an engineer, I'm not an attorney. I've worked on the energy development side. I understand a little bit about a lot, enough to understand the value of CPACE and how it's evolved over time. And as an administrator, they always want us to showcase the different projects that, you know, the benefit of CPACE, right?
Right.
So for my role, like housing, you know, obviously is a big priority in Massachusetts, affordable housing, looking at jump-starting projects that would be built. So I've spent a lot of time educating people who aren't in the CPACE world, don't have time to understand it all. That like this is a form of capital that actually comes in maybe to replace higher cost capital. This project is probably going to get built at some point. So I'm not rescuing the project, right? I'm not transforming it in the way that they think they're going to, you know, well, now a geothermal system can be attached to the building. Like you're talking about little tweaks, and that's more realistic. So how do we reframe this CPACE, you know, idea? Because I will say, like, for the borrower, you know, reducing the cost of capital, that's the value proposition. For like an energy person, maybe like adding more energy improvements, or you know, greening it up in some way is kind of a benefit.
Yep.
But
I think you need to frame it as
that has to flow through municipal properties. You know, there's a lot more you have to sell it to, you know, to stakeholders. Like,
I think you need to frame it as an enabler, right? Like PACE is enabling projects that otherwise might not happen or might take longer to happen,
Right.
or might happen and with a capital stack that's expensive and puts the project at risk. So PACE can accelerate the development of projects and capitalize them. This is an annoying word, but capitalize them more sustainably, not like from an green perspective, but from an economic perspective.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, I wanted to call on Kyle before you want to jump in with something. I also want you to cover some of what you have done in New York. I think Curtis did a really good job yesterday of describing like the community, the benefits of some of the projects that you guys have gotten done and what your pipeline looks like.
Yeah, sure. I would just add on to what Robbie was just mentioning, by reducing the cost of capital for projects, right? And while I agree with it's New York, you know, I do think depending on the standard, it can make a project different, right? So, for production, have an all electric standard, which is approved for buildings under 7 stories. Those over 7 stories. And we have had just for the project that was partially retroactive, so it was partially built, but it still has a muscle.
Yeah.
And did they take out the fossil fuels?
Yes. You know, I mean, that was a small part of the overall cost, but
Yeah.
that added cost was worth it.
Yeah.
To get the base capital. So I do think you can get
Just quickly, I would say the NYSEG program and the EIC program in New York, those are the probably the most obvious places where you do see bigger changes. We're working with a developer in New York State right now who is going to build, with natural gas boilers and stuff, and had their design basically done, and they can't get the PACE dollars they were looking for. And so they are going back, and it's a big building, and they're going to totally redesign their HVAC system to use electric resistance and heat pumps. That usually doesn't happen. People don't usually make that massive of change. But in this case, because of the program and the way it unlocks way more PACE dollars, they are making that change. So it can influence. I didn't mean to dismiss that. But I think in New York, it's probably the most obvious place where you see it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the New York, well, the Northeast programs generally, because I would include Massachusetts in this, have higher hurdles than some other programs. And so I think we are more likely to see design changes being made in those markets than in others.
Yep, agreed.
That's not the, I mean, it still holds true that most efficient ways to come in as early as possible, right? And, it can work, it even work to almost rescue capacity so long as cost is not
Right.
cost
So,
Yeah, and that might be a good segue into some real world examples. I think it gets really interesting when you talk about a project and what was the problem in that project and how did PACE solve it? And how did you get the deal done? So like to make this more interesting, like give us the full story of a deal that, you worked on from the earliest stages before it came out of the ground. And yeah.
So there's two deals. So yeah, we had kind of discussed framing this conversation as pre-construction problem solution, mid-construction problem solution, post-construction problem solution. And I'm going to talk about two pre-construction problem solutions. The problem was the same for both. They were looking for better cost of capital. There was a project that both of these are actually projects I'm currently working on, so they haven't closed yet. So hopefully I'm not jinxing anything. But there is an office to multi conversion in Pennsylvania, which is a lovely project, right? We all want better uses for old office buildings, but these projects are expensive because there are always literally things you don't know inside the walls. And so when you start to do the renovation, costs go up, you need contingency. This project has the added cherry on top of a relatively inexperienced sponsor. So he was having a really hard time getting quotes. There's also historic tax credits involved. And, we're not giving him our best rate, but the rate we're providing is so much lower than the other rates he was getting. So I can confidently say this project would not happen without PACE. And they haven't had to do a lot of design modifications. Luckily, the architect that they had engaged is both the head of the town council and a former PACE borrower himself. So I think that they had always kind of angled for PACE as a solution for this project. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to close that financing this quarter and it can be underway. So really good, feel good project. PACE is, again, enabling it to start. And that's just by providing, sub 8% money to a project that we all know is going to be challenging.
mm-hmm.
Another project that I'm...
Before you go on, where was it pricing without PACE?
Oh, like north of 10%. I think that he got a partial quote at 10.5%, but it wasn't for all the money that he needed. And so then there was going to have to be a mezz tranche that was going to price over 15%. And there's still a small sliver of what we can call like senior mezz. So it's a mortgage. There's a deed in trust, but it's priced, like mezz. But now that slice of the cap stack is only $5 million instead of $20 million.
Yeah, and we're not talking about senior lender consent, but when you think about senior lender consent, they are getting compensated to be that last $5 million behind the CPACE with a mezz-like rate and a mortgage structure.
Yeah.
Right.
And they have the confidence, because of the way PACE funds, we are almost always fully funded at close. It gives them the confidence that that money's there. Because once we fund that escrow account, the money can only be used for the construction of this project. So the senior lender that, does have a slightly shakier position alongside PACE, is not only getting compensated with a pretty juicy rate, but they know that that money is there and that that project's going to get finished. The second project is, like, the morals of this project are not my favorite, but it is a luxury car condominium project. So there are people in Texas with a lot of fancy cars, and they don't want to keep them at their house. They want to put them in a special facility where they are protected and can be shown off. And they are willing to pay between $750,000 and $1.25 million for 1,000 square foot garage condo. And there's a project outside of Dallas. They're building 80 of these. 40 have already sold, which is wild to me. But they are also getting, 12, 13% senior quotes. And PACE is being brought in to blend down the cost of capital. And this project, it's a condo project. So, we're charging a pretty healthy rate as well. And unlike many projects that we intend to support for a long time, we will be paid out as the units are sold.
And these condos have EV charging stations in them.
No,
Something.
the project is, it's designed to surpass Texas code. So to qualify for PACE in Texas, Texas does have a cost benefit ratio. So the project needs to be built to a high enough standard that the delta of, like, building to code versus what they're building is justifiable by savings that are generated. So they are building a more efficient building, but no, I don't think that these people have Teslas. I think they have like Ferraris.
Right.
And Ferraris are not electric
And
yet.
Ferraris are not electric.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But you highlight an interesting problem, which is some esoteric project. We see a lot of esoteric projects in PACE, and that's a pretty fun example of something that's
the little boy in me loves it because it's like cool.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I'm excited for it to be built. I am a little shocked that the market exists, but it does.
Great. I think, Steve, you told us a little bit about pre-development work.
Yeah, the example I was going to use is actually the one I talked about that, again, I can't disclose because we're working on it right now, but we had one that went fully electric because of the rules. And this was a state program, not a city program, but that's a big change. I would say one other, in addition to making just kind of tweaks around the edges for energy efficiency purposes, some of the programs like Connecticut and New Hampshire and New Jersey have these bonus technology concept too, where it's like, okay, you qualify for 20% of CPACE, but then if you do anything in these discrete lists of 7 things, you get 2.5% more if you put in EV chargers. You get 2.5% more if you do solar panels. There's this list of things. Those are the first places we go if somebody's trying to maximize and they're not to the goal targets yet on those kinds of programs, because a lot of times they are not checking some of those boxes. And EV chargers, they cost something, but you can put in a couple EV chargers for somewhere between 20 and 50 grand, depending on the situation. And relative to most construction costs, it's not that big a deal. So if it gets another 2.5% of your construction costs, eligible for PACE, usually that's a pretty good ROI. Plus, it's then an amenity you weren't going to have before. So that's one other programmatic way we think about how do you maximize and maybe encourage people to do things that they wouldn't have otherwise, is go to these bonus technology concepts in the states that do have things like that.
Yeah, I think Atlanta does. I see Melody over there.
Yeah,
Atlanta
Atlanta
has
does too.
some bonus concepts that are actually not even tied to the efficiency goals, but they're tied to broader public policy goals.
Yep.
And I think that's a really interesting way to think about these projects, is like, how can we address some of the things that the city is currently focused on in New York? I know it's housing, I guess also in Massachusetts. And so, you know, if you're doing a housing project, maybe there is more flexibility and pace than there would have otherwise been.
And I'm generally a fan of the like bonus technology concept, right? Because when I think about pace, I do think about projects that have some public benefit, but this phase we're sort of in of the industry at the moment, I think of as like getting the frog into the pot, and then we can start to turn up the temperature. But the bonus technologies are a good way to do that, right? Because then it directly encourages people to make a better choice today to qualify for more money.
Yeah, I agree. I like it too.
And in the projects that you're looking at, instead of replacing higher cost capital, are there instances where you're actually replacing, say, an alternate state incentive or local incentive? And I'll give you an example. In Massachusetts, it's really valuable for us if we can shift maybe like a tax credit bridge program incentive, you know, into a C-PACE financing, which is by a third party rather than state funded grant. We're replacing, and we're able to shift that funding somewhere else. To us, that's the public benefit. Instead of, you know, to be honest, a lower cost of capital for the borrower.
No, it's less money. It's more money that you can give to other projects. So I haven't seen that specifically yet, but I am actually working on a lot of projects where that's the goal. And PACE often exists alongside incentives or tax credits. You know, we happily coexist with almost any part of a capital stack. And I have not yet seen PACE directly finance credits like as a bridge, but I see no reason it can't. And I'm actually trying to figure that out in a few states that have strong tax credit programs.
At this point, we did a transaction where the city had put up $1 million, going to be subordinated debt, basically, in order to get started. Came in, we were able to qualify, that would allow them to take that back. Worked out really well for the city. Borrower got a little bit more than that $1 million.
I like that. Yeah, typically what I see is people like double dipping, right? Like they'll use the PACE to finance something and then qualify for some sort of incentive based on what we have financed, like the renewable system or the more efficient system. But, you know, I think there's no reason we can't kind of cut out the middleman. We just have to find the right opportunity.
Or if there were some state-sponsored credit enhancement to the C-PACE,
Yeah,
that might make it less expensive and, you know, more likely to replace some of the dollars that you are taking out of your state budget.
but I like where your head's at, because I think that is an area of evolution.
Yeah,
Like I suspect it's already being done in some deals, but like that's not the part that's highlighted.
right.
So I would encourage you to like also highlight that as part of the deal, because from a program administrator point of view, like that really is a great selling point.
Yeah.
For more widespread adoption.
It's not exactly what you're talking about, because there's not like this public good necessarily. And I saw the hand, sorry. But in Nebraska, people have done some interesting things commingling TIF financing and PACE for those areas that have TIF. And I think generally the concept is because the TIF was usually 15-year notes and the PACE was somewhere between 25 and 30, they wanted to spread the peanut butter as long as they possibly could. So they're getting more PACE dollars, even though they got some TIF dollars, and then they're paying off the TIF note with a PACE to spread that longer and give them longer on-ramps. just another way you could not only coexist, but like co-mingle concept almost. So I've seen some people do some creative stuff.
What's up, Jason?
I think the other thing that I'm seeing out of the first quarter is the idea of, I like how you broke down the stages of phase, right? I really think the recaps is another thing where PACE has provided this kind of next stage solution, right? How the property is built, working towards stabilization. So we did PACE help with that. Next 10 plus years of ownership or something that I really like to highlight the recaps because it's a way to kind of transition from construction to a longer term, more stabilized, while still recognizing the efforts to build the planners.
Right.
Yeah, Robbie, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Some examples of projects you've had that have
Yeah,
successfully
so-
leveraged CPACE?
We worked, Steve's firm and my firm, on a hospitality project in New Jersey, and PACE was brought in to take out the construction loan. And, you know, the project like obviously once the project is finished, there's not much you can do. Like if they built a shitty building, it's not going to qualify for PACE. So we've got to be.
That's the technical term, by the way. Shitty.
We've got to be dealing with a certain caliber of construction. And so you're really kind of getting credit where it's due. You're getting credit for having done the right thing. But what was very fun about this specific project, and I'm sorry I can't share the name, the town has told us that we can't, which is, I don't really understand. But New Jersey is a bonus technology state. And you know what you can add post facto? An EV charging station.
Right.
That's really easy to add after the fact. And so that's what they did. They built a very high quality project, went in after the fact and installed, what was it, two or three
EV chargers,
two
yeah.
EV chargers, and then was able to qualify for max PACE financing, which, because of the value creation of the project, took out the majority of the construction loan. And you know, now they have capital for as long as they need it.
Yep.
It's great with that example too. It's like hospitality. Yes, we're sometimes the economic drivers get lost in kind of conversation. So as a result of this hotel now flourishing, or there's housekeeping jobs, there's front of house jobs, like
Right.
you're contributing to that in that respect. Kind of becomes less of a sustainable, I guess, build discussion, but more fabric of the community, which I think is still a major part of the ethos.
Well, yeah, part of sustainability, right, is like a community. So yes, the sponsor had used prevailing wage, which was fortunate, right? So one of the bigger challenges in New Jersey, which New Jersey's program does have a prevailing wage requirement, which is obviously fine for forward-looking projects because you can just choose to pay prevailing wage. It's pretty complicated for a retro project. So this sponsor had used prevailing wage and they were able to sort of attest to that. But yeah, retro projects in New Jersey, I think will be challenging, you know, up till now. It might be different going forward now that people know that that's a program requirement.
Mm-hmm.
Should we jump into rescuing a project mid-construction?
Yeah, well, we have, I have two examples for mid-construction. One is kind of a rescue and one is sort of an accelerant. So the rescue project was actually one I worked on when I was at Northbridge, and it's a great project. So it was a huge adaptive reuse project of an old Pico power plant right on the bank of the Delaware. It was being renovated into apartments, hospitality, office, retail, like a huge campus. It's called The Battery. It's an amazing project. And again, adaptive reuse projects prone to budget overages and schedule delays. This had the added layer of COVID, right? It was like built kind of through the pandemic. So they hit a point where the project was almost done, but about $30 million over budget, which sounds like a lot, but not for a $300 million project. The senior lender, Wells Fargo, would have normally provided that money, but they weren't able to because they had an exposure limit with this borrower. So literally the Wells Fargo, guidelines prohibited them from extending additional credit to this borrower. But the project needed the money, needed to be finished. It was almost there. And PACE was a perfect solution. So we were able to fill that gap, get the project across the finish line. And you told me the other day that it's thriving.
It's doing really well, and they're likely to be able to find really accretive permanent financing. And so in that case, PACE served as the bridge to stabilization in that project. And we see that a lot, both mid-construction, which takes some retroactive and some forward-looking, and also to your point, at the end of construction when maybe the project's not immediately stabilized.
So yeah, that's an amazing case study for PACE. And that project, I think, won the PACE Setter Award for the year it was done. Yeah. Yep. So remember how I just told Wendy I was trying to figure that out on certain programs? That's one of them. So no, we haven't cracked that nut yet, but I'm working on it, and you should find me after this call. Cool.
On the Wells Fargo deal, what was the process like getting there?
Great question.
I think it was relatively easy because they understood the position that they were in, and we were really solving a thorny problem for them. That said, it was not easy relative to obtaining other senior lender consents. So I think working with a national bank is always going to be more challenging than working with a debt fund or a local or regional bank. So I think easy considering the parties involved.
Yeah, and I think that's what we always say about senior lender consent is there is usually a reason why the lender is consenting. So the decision was made at Wells Fargo that this was good for the project, good for their customer relationship. And so then they went through all of the traps. Wells Fargo consented on another complicated, thorny rescue deal this year, the Rio in Las Vegas, which was not any of our deals, but was a Wells Fargo consent deal. Same thing. Their loan was very much underwater, and PACE was coming in to pay down some of that principal to Wells Fargo. So they were very incentivized to come along and go through all of their process to get the consent for CPACE.
Yeah, and we often see that. So in the battery case, I don't think there was a pay down of the senior loan because the PACE the gap wasn't that big. But what we do often see in these kind of mid-construction rescue deals is part of the PACE being used to reduce the senior lender's exposure. So they are getting an immediate benefit.
My favorite Wells Fargo consent was when the Child Abuse Prevention Center in Sacramento had a curtain like nonprofit. Wells Fargo did not increase their loan. Several times. And they said, please do PACE. So it was a really good way to show how that was rescue capital for kids.
That's a real problem solver right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good example.
that is a great example.
Yeah.
Also, it sounds like Wells Fargo might be one of the more forward-thinking, pace-friendly banks, because I don't think I haven't heard similar stories around JPM or BFA. Okay, and then the other mid-construction project is the data center that I closed last December, which Steve did the energy study for, and this is a great project. Like, I love this story. So there's an abandoned printing press in downtown Kansas City. It was built in 2006, state of the art. They spared no expense. It's literally clad in copper. I think it's the world's most beautiful data center. And it had a 25 megawatt power allocation. The Kansas City Star was defunct like by 2015. So you have this huge building with a huge power allocation in a prime location, just sitting unused. And this company, Patmos, realized that it would be a great opportunity for sort of what's called an edge data center, so a data center close to civilization. And almost all of the expenses for the conversion were PACE eligible. It's all just mechanical and electric. We weren't able to finance the backup generators, but that's fine.
We tried.
We tried. And the owner's got to have some equity, right? But what was particularly cool about this project was, given the crazy demand for AI-enabled data centers, the tenants are often willing to put a lot of money into their leases up front. And the project, like the Patmos, had spent a lot of that money during the build out. And so we were able to retro finance the improvements that were installed with tenant money to allow Patmos to buy the building. So we solved so many problems, right? Like, we didn't just solve financing the construction, but we actually solved like getting the building out of the hands of the former Kansas City Star family and into the hands of Patmos. So now they kind of control their future.
This is a different kind of problem solving, but it's the same project. For any of you that have to deal with this gets it gets surprisingly complicated. For the qualification of that one, they were doing some amount of internal cooling. They had their own equipment to do some of their own cooling, but then they were also tying into a district chill water system. And those situations are tricky technically about how you think about that and how you argue your case. It's funny, like, I'm an engineer, but on these projects, I'm more like a technical attorney, basically arguing the case on why you should be, PACE eligible for things. And district steam and chill water gets really interesting. If you've ever dealt with it, you probably understand. But like, where it's coming from may be more energy efficient, so that's a lower carbon thing to connect to it. But you are definitely going to pay more per ton hour of cooling buying it from a district system than you are making it yourself. You're just thinking about the electricity piece, because the district chill water system has the initial cost that they had to build into it. They have all their maintenance staff. They've got the replacements. So you're buying more than just the power component. You're buying the entire business component of that thing. So when you're looking for PACE eligibility, usually it's based on like dollars of savings. Well, in this case, you are actually doing a lower carbon thing, but you are paying much more usually for the utility consumption. And so navigating that can get interesting. And Josh and Angela aren't here, are they?
No.
Josh out of Show Me Pace, and then his technical engineer and staff, Angela, were fantastic to work for. Angela and I just got on the phone and kind of worked it through and made good common sense of it. And so that was a great collaborative thing. And I was really thankful for Angela, because we needed to work that through. And I'm going to just give a shout out to any administrators here. As a rule, like I came from the Fed world, and our clients basically were fighting us the whole time trying to get things done. It's awesome to work with the administrators here who are, usually want to make things happen, right? And we want to see these projects happen. So we're all motivated, but also just tend to be smart, good people too. So I do really appreciate working with all the folks here. It's been really refreshing.
But yeah, that was an interesting one, because when you did the like traditional PACE analysis, it didn't seem to make sense.
Right.
And then it's like, but come on, like this obviously makes sense, right? Like we're putting in this state-of-the-art efficient data center that's reliant on chilled water that's being produced off-site. Like we have to figure out a way to validate this.
Right. Took a little creative.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, is that maybe, you know, sometimes the program guidelines work not as intended in that way. And there, you know, sometimes it's valuable to look at the project and the outcome first, and then work backwards into how to make that work for, you know, for PACE eligibility. We are at time. I know some people have flights to catch this afternoon, so we don't keep anybody, but we'll be around if you have any more questions. Thank you for coming.
Cool. Thank you.